What the heck, GM? What the heck is right with the GM? Bet you didn't expect that. I've been doing a whole series of these videos about what the heck is wrong with certain manufacturers like Ford or Jeep. And it was natural to transition into doing one about General Motors overall. But as I was prepping for this video, I realized I had far more positive things to say about GM than I did negative. So this is what the heck is right with GM. And I'm going to break it down into 3 different categories. Category 1, product. That's their weakest. Category 2, be design. And category 3 will be business, the business of General Motors. But before we jump into it, if you're new here, welcome back to All Course. I'm John. And my family has a long history with GM. I am not a GM fanboy. And growing up, my whole family owned General Motors cars. My parents and my grandparents owned Buicks, Pontiacs, Oldsmobiles, and Cadillacs. And somewhere around the mid-'80s, we started to move away from them. My last GM car was late 90s, a used Chevy Cavalier. Now, what we saw for a 15-year period, nearly a 20-year period, was that every GM car was worse than the one before. And so we moved away like millions of other buyers. But about a year ago, I realized I was starting to trust GM again. That in my history, I've said many times, I saw GM as they couldn't do everything right all at the same time, right? If they made a new platform, they had to put an old engine in it. They made a new engine, well, it tended to be noisy and unrefined or unremarkable or unreliable. If they got both of those right, well, the interiors were cheapened out and just a nasty place to spend time. Sure, GM went through their bankruptcy, but they never really changed not getting it all right all at the same time. They came close in some cases. But I've realized recently that there's more and more products by GM that I'm starting to look on favorably. And more importantly, is I'm starting to look favorably on General Motors as a whole. And that's a big, big change for me. So talking about the product, that is one of their weaker spots, but it's still relatively strong. They've got some outstanding products. The Tahoe, the Suburban, their trucks. All of this is subjective. You may disagree, but there's a lot of strong stuff out there. And I want to give them credit, especially for the tracks. They had moved away from cars and smaller SUVs and realized they needed something at the smaller end. So they brought the tracks back. And a lot of their styling previously has, well, it's been bubulous and roundy and just sometimes not very attractive. They weren't doing a good job differentiating their different divisions, their different brands. But I think they've got that all straight. We'll talk more about that in design in a second. But in terms of product, there often are a lot of really competitive offerings in individual segments. Take the Equinox, for example. You could argue it's not better than the CR-V or the RAV4, but it's a thoroughly competitive product, and I think the new one looks great. The same thing with the Traverse. The last one was really good. Not great, but really good. And the new one kind of fits that mold too. It's like they're not trying to be class leading, but at least they're making something thoroughly competitive for the market and for their buyers. The new Colorado is arguably better than the new Ranger. They've been doing a lot right there, but there's been some missteps. They've missed the boat on a few things. Where's the Maverick competitor? They completely missed that and that popularity. They missed the retro move that the Bronco and the, Land Rover Defender have. They came out with their Blazer and just made it, well, as some would argue, a four-door sport utility Camaro. Not sure I buy that entirely. I think they just missed it and end up with another generic midsize SUV. So it's not all perfect on the product planning side, but it's been getting so much better recently. And that kind of leaves me with that trust in GM, which comes back to reliability. How do you measure this? I did a whole video on this some time ago. How do you measure it? How do you believe it? How do you know in advance? Well, nobody has a great answer. We can look at J.D. Power, which people like to criticize that manufacturers can just buy their results there. Well, on initial quality, Chevy and Buick are near the top. Extremely good. So it comes out of the factory. Is it bolted together correctly? You can look at J.D. Power dependability. Well, again, Chevy and Buick do very well right there. So it lasts, at least according to them. You don't buy J.D. Power, you can look at Consumer Reports. Again, criticized by people. Well, they do about halfway. GMs tend to be mid-pack. It's not unfair to say they're worse than every Asian manufacturer, but better than any other American manufacturers. So I think my feeling on GM is you're probably going to get something okay, but you don't have that sense of confidence you have with, say, buying a Toyota or a Honda. One of the best comments I got recently was from a viewer who said they worked at an auto parts store, and take it for what you will, they get more GM parts being bought than anything else. And of course, you've always got people like Scotty Kilmer out there who hate General Motors and the cheapening up of the parts from latches and door handles and just things like that. So I'm getting to the point I trust GM, but ultimately I don't believe they have that inherent, we've got to be the best, we've got to build the best, and we've got to build it to last for 300,000 miles. But let's move on to design real quick, because this is more positive. And I think GM is absolutely killing it. Like I mentioned, some of their earlier stuff recently has been kind of bubulous and amorphous. But I think they fixed a lot of that. They redesigned the trucks and totally missed the ball on the interiors, but they fixed it with that mid-cycle refresh. The new Trax looks fantastic. The Equinox, the Traverse, the Tahoe, the Suburban, the list goes on. Their products all look fantastic. And on the interiors, they aren't necessarily the individual pieces sometimes are not the best in the market. But that's really nitpicking. I think what GM is doing in terms of the style and materials on the interior is really exceptional right now. And then we move on to the other brands. I've been focusing on Chevy here. GMC, they've done a great job with their recent styling, making it look different than the Chevy offerings. They all look fantastic. I absolutely adore the Terrain and the Acadia. Even Cadillac, they've got their problems, and I've talked at length about that. But they're doing a good job of not making it look like, a GMC with a different grille. And then Buick. People love to kick on Buick. The Buick only exists because, well, the Chinese. But man, their styling looks fantastic. Their new products based on the Trax and others look fantastic. And their sales are going up. They're doing good stuff over there and on their interiors. GM used to be a styling leader. And I don't know that they're challenging Mercedes or BMW or Genesis. But man, I do think they're building some of the best looking cars out there in the mass market. I really do. And that leaves me with the business of GM. Number 3 on our list here, and this is where things got really, really positive. Now, ultimately, the fundamental business of GM should be building excellent cars that people want to buy. And at least part of that is recapturing people like me, people who don't trust them, but getting us to the point where we're willing to take that shot again, put our money down and make payments for 5 years or 4 years or 7 years and buy another General Motors. But from the business of GM, This is where I think they're doing the best right now. The number one thing I want to highlight is that they actually have businesses around the world, and they've been managing them properly. Most of my history, most of my life, watching GM buy a company is like a death sentence. I think of Solid. They run it into the ground and then scatter the pieces when they're done. GM bought Daewoo over in Korea and turned it into GM South Korea. And they've been building things for a while, not very good, but they've been building things for GM, but the new ones are getting much, much better. That new Trax is a GM South Korea product, and it looks fantastic. Tiny, tiny little engine, a lot of criticism about that, but will it hold up? That's the question. But the fact that they've turned it into not just a cheap division, but a styling division, I'm really impressed with that. Another thing is, they brought back a Hummer, and I was really against that to begin with. That sounded like the bad old days of GM all over again. Have an idea? Create a division for it. But I think, in hindsight, they did it very, very right. They brought out the Ultium platform. They made the Hummer. They can make it expensive. It doesn't have any negative impacts on any of the other brands if something went horribly wrong. And in the process, created something that I think could be an excellent counter to Rivian if they continue to develop it that way. And that leaves me with their electrification efforts. Now, a lot of people here who watch this channel despise the EV movement. And I get that. I do. They see it as a major waste of time, a major waste of money and resources for manufacturers. But put that aside for a minute and buy in with me that there's a move to EVs. GM has accidentally put themselves at the forefront of EVs. Oh, John, what the heck are you talking about? Their sales are minuscule. Well, Ford spent billions to develop a platform for the Mach-E, builds one product they lose money on. Then they built another platform for the F-150 Lightning. Nissan built the Leaf, another Leaf, and then the Ariya. Stellantis is still suffering along, trying to get their platform out. Honda ended up just coming to GM because of their platform. And other manufacturers really just have nothing out there right now. GM has put these resources into the Ultium platform that can be used up and down their product line and side to side in price range. Extremely flexible. It's not the Goliath killer I really was kind of hoping from them. And of course, Tesla is still the leader in sales and efficiency. But GM has a platform that they can roll out to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of sales. I really believe that. There's nobody close except for maybe Volkswagen. Now, that rollout has not been perfect, of course. They've had their issues with software. But they really are at the pole position of rolling out products in the EV market up and down the price range. Where that's left them, however, is that they did drop the ball on hybridization. They were once a leader in that and in electrification, but the move has been EVs not being adopted as fast, and more hybrids are going to be necessary, and GM's kind of left behind on that. So they did miss it strategically there. But that's easy to fix. They could go license somebody else's today and start doing it within a year or two, have hybridization on their products. So I'm not worried about that, and they probably have something in their back pocket to begin with, but it does feel like they missed the ball, missed a plan B on that. And finally, for business decisions, let's think about self-driving. I think they've been very quiet about their consumer-facing self-driving. But for their robo-taxis, they again are a leader in that business. They're, I believe, slightly behind Waymo, and GM's Cruise had some really bad news. They were having accidents, hiding it, shut down. I think their CEO left, and they've got a new one. They're relaunching everything. But they've been working on this for years. They've been working on this in different cities, just like Waymo. And I don't buy the whole robo-taxi is one of the biggest businesses in the future. Elon over at Tesla is willing to lean in heavily to it. So there must be something there. And GM's right there with their products. So from a business perspective, they've had some missteps, but they're right there building internationally and not retreating internationally, not like others have. They're positioning themselves for businesses in the future. They've revitalized their products. I think their engines are better. They've revitalized their design substantially. So there is a lot of positive going on with GM right now. It's not perfect. And ultimately, I would say they don't have an inherent level of trust for me that if I go buy a Honda or a Toyota, I just believe it's going to be good and be able to last me for decades and hundreds of thousands of miles. With the GM, I've always would have that thought in the back of my mind. Is this when something's going to go wrong? And I'll close with, many people do not like Mary Barra over at GM. And they disagree with many of her moves. Certainly I disagree with, getting rid of the Bolt prematurely when you don't have something else in place to take it. But I do believe that Mary Barra has fundamentally changed the culture at GM. It's not done. She's not done. But I believe she's doing good work. And a GM of old that hid recalls or hid issues, tried to cover it up. I believe that GM is different now. That they step up and they do try to do the right thing. It may still be wrong, but I do believe they fundamentally are trying to do the right thing and build good products at a price. Are they perfect? Are they Toyota? Are they going to become the number one manufacturer in the world? I don't think so. But I do think that they're pointed in the right direction. I do think they've got some momentum behind them. And I do think that their business moves and their product moves have got them well laid out for the next 5, 10, 15 years, long enough to find that next transition in their leadership. Let me know what you think below, guys. I appreciate you being here for what the heck is right with GM. And I do apologize. It's hotter than heck out here. Thanks, y'all. Oh, almost forgot. We do have a podcast now, so please go check that out. All Cars with John podcast. Right now, it is my old histories. I've been taking those, improving the audio on them, and uploading them as a podcast. So if you like listening to my stuff and not watching my face, feel free to download the podcast and wherever you get your podcast from. Appreciate being here.